Someone filled my water tank with concrete on purpose, not out of spite. Well, maybe a little out of spite, but mostly because my new neighbor, Deborah Skinner, decided it didn't match the aesthetic of the community. The community she apparently runs from her front porch with a fake HOA title and a stack of forged letterheads she printed at the library. I moved to rural Nebraska to grow native wildflowers and get away from the noise of the city, not to get into a turf war over a 40-year-old chunk of reinforced concrete. But when I woke up to the sound of a cement mixer backing into my yard, I realized that my quiet life was over. Deborah had no idea what her little stunt was about to set in motion, and honestly, neither did I. My name is Wade Barnes, and 6 months ago, I thought I was making the smartest decision of my 35-year-old life. I'd spent a decade in Denver designing corporate landscaping, soulless strips of grass and ornamental trees that die in 3 years, and I was done. I saved every penny I could, quit my job, and bought my dream property, 10 acres of Nebraska farmland with a charming, if slightly drafty, 1960s farmhouse. The Miller family, who owned it before me, had passed away, and their kids just wanted to unload the asset. It was perfect. Mature oak trees, rolling hills, and silence. There was one feature I really loved, a massive concrete water tank near the back of the property. It was about the size of a small swimming pool and maybe 8 feet deep. I assumed it was an old irrigation reservoir from the farm's heyday. It was solid, well-maintained, and I figured it would make the perfect rainwater collection system for the native prairie restoration project I was planning. I was 2 weeks into the renovation, kneeling in the dirt, marking out spots for seedlings, when the gravel on my driveway crunched. I looked up to see a woman marching toward me. She was in her late 30s, wearing a safety vest over a floral blouse, holding a clipboard like a weapon. "Are you the new owner?" she asked. "No hello, no welcome to the neighborhood. Just an interrogation." "I am," I said, standing up and wiping the dirt off my hands. "Wade Barnes. Nice to meet you." "I'm Deborah Skinner," she said, her eyes scanning my yard with blatant disapproval. "President of the Millbrook Rural Association. We need to discuss some serious concerns about your property." I frowned. "Concerns?" She pointed a manicured finger at the concrete tank. "That structure. It is an unregulated aquatic threat. It could harbor mosquitoes. It's an attractive nuisance for children, and frankly, it represents a severe visual disharmony with the pastoral standards we try to maintain here." I looked at the tank. It was gray. It was round. It was concrete. It looked like a farm tank on a farm. "I'm sorry," I said, trying to keep it light. "It's been here for 40 years. I'm planning to use it for irrigation. It's solid." Deborah's eyes narrowed. "Mr. Barnes, previous ownership is irrelevant. You are now responsible for bringing this property into compliance. That tank must be inspected for structural integrity and water quality, or it must be removed. Here are the community regulations." She shoved a thick packet of papers into my chest. They looked like they had been photocopied 100 times. "I expect full compliance within 2 weeks." She turned on her heel and marched back to her pristine white SUV. As she drove away, I flipped through the packet. It was ridiculous. Rules about paint colors, grass height, mailbox shapes. And buried on page 15, a vague paragraph about water storage compliance. I went inside and did what any millennial does. I Googled it. Millbrook Rural Association. Nothing. No website. No county registration. No tax ID. As far as the state of Nebraska was concerned, this association didn't exist. It was a ghost. I figured she was just a busybody with too much time on her hands. I decided to ignore her. That was my first mistake. A few days later, I walked down the road to introduce myself to my nearest neighbor, Frank Davis. Frank is exactly what you want in a neighbor, 58 years old, built like a tractor, and speaks in sentences that get straight to the point. "Frank," I said, leaning on his fence. "Who is Deborah Skinner?" Frank sighed, taking off his cap and rubbing his head. You met the Queen of Millbrook. She gave me a packet of rules," I said. "She wants me to tear down my water tank." Frank's face went stiff. He looked toward my property, a shadow passing over his eyes. "She's been trying to run things around here for 12 years. She used to work in the county records office before she got fired. Now she uses what she learned to bully folks with fake paperwork. Most people just do what she says because she makes life miserable if you don't." He paused, then looked me dead in the eye. "But Wade, be careful with that tank. It's been there a long time. It's important. Important how? Just important, Frank said, turning back to his chores. Don't let her touch it. I went home feeling uneasy. Over the next week, the harassment escalated. I got letters in my mailbox daily. Final notice. Safety violation. Environmental hazard. She demanded I hire a specific inspector, who turned out to be her brother-in-law, to assess the tank for $15,000. I emailed her back, polite but firm. Mrs. Skinner, I have checked the county records. Your association has no legal standing. My property is up to code. Please stop contacting me. She called me the next morning at 7:30 a.m. Mr. Barnes, she hissed, her voice trembling with rage. You are endangering this community. If you refuse to act, we will take necessary measures to protect the welfare of the neighborhood, by any means required. Is that a threat? I asked. It's a promise, she said, and hung up. I called the county inspector myself, a guy named Tom. He came out, looked at the tank, looked at my plans, and shrugged. It's fine, Wade. Solid concrete. No leaks. Just keep a cover on it. While Tom was there, Deborah showed up. She tried to hand him a dossier of evidence, proving the tank was a hazard. Tom looked at her paperwork, then at her. Ma'am, these codes don't exist. You're citing statutes from a different state. Deborah turned purple. This community was here before you. She spat at me, ignoring Tom completely. And it will be here long after you're gone. I thought that was the end of it. I thought the county inspector had shut her down. I was wrong. On Friday morning, the sun hadn't even crested the hills when a low rumble shook my house. I looked out the window and saw a cement mixer backing down my driveway. I threw on my boots and ran outside. Hey, what are you doing? There were 3 guys in hard hats. The chute was already extended over the lip of my water tank. And standing there, wearing a yellow safety vest and holding a clipboard, was Deborah. Stop, I yelled, sprinting across the yard. This is private property. The foreman looked at me, then at Deborah. Lady said she had the permits. Said it was an emergency safety fill. She's lying. I screamed. Get that truck out of here. Proceed, Deborah ordered, her voice cold and authoritative. I have the authorization right here. She waved a piece of paper with a gold seal on it. The foreman hesitated, but the drum was already spinning. Look, buddy, I got a work order. Check's cleared. It's a hazard abatement. He pulled the lever. Gray sludge poured into the tank. I watched in horror as gallons of concrete began to fill the reservoir. I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. It took Deputy Williams 20 minutes to get there. By then, the truck was empty, and my tank was a solid block of wet cement. Deborah met the deputy at the driveway, calm as a cucumber. Officer, this was a necessary intervention. Mr. Barnes refused to address a critical safety hazard. We acted under the emergency provisions of the community charter. She's trespassing, I yelled. She vandalized my property. Deputy Williams looked at Deborah's official documents. He looked at my deed. He looked at the drying concrete. This looks like a civil dispute, he said, the words that every homeowner dreads. You guys need to work this out in court. I can't arrest someone for a contract dispute. He got back in his car and left. Deborah walked up to me, smiling. She handed me a manila envelope. This is the invoice for the emergency services. $6,500. Payable to the association. You have 30 days. She got in her SUV and drove away. I stood there, staring at the ruined tank, shaking with a rage so pure it felt like it was burning a hole in my chest. I wanted to tear her house down brick by brick. I wanted to scream until my throat bled. That evening, Frank came over. He walked across the field, his head down, looking like he was walking to a funeral. Wade, he said, his voice heavy. You need to know what you just lost. I know what I lost, I snapped. A rainwater tank. No, Frank said softly. You didn't just lose a tank. You unplugged the valley. I stared at him. What? That tank, Frank said, pointing to the concrete tomb. It wasn't for irrigation. In 1965, the wells dried up. Old man Miller dug deep and hit a heavy aquifer. He built that tank to pressurize a system. He ran pipes to 12 houses in this valley, including mine, including Deborah's. My mouth fell open. You're kidding. We've all been paying $50 a month for water since the 60s, Frank said. Miller's kids just kept collecting the checks. We never formalized it because, well, it's Nebraska. A handshake means something here. Wait, I said, the gears turning in my head. I've been getting those checks. I thought they were hay subsidies or coop dividends. I've been depositing them. You've been the water utility manager for 6 months, Frank said. And Deborah just filled the supply with concrete. Does she know? I asked. She has to, Frank said. She pays the bill. But Wade, think about it. Why would she destroy her own water source? Because she wants the land, I realized. She wants me gone. 3 years ago, Frank said, Deborah tried to buy this place. She wanted to build a wellness retreat. Spa, yoga, the works. The financing fell through. When you bought it, she snapped. She figures if she makes your life hell, you'll sell cheap. Then she can drill a new well and open her resort. She cut off her own water, I whispered, just to force me out. And not just hers, Frank said grimly. Everyone's. We have pressure tanks in our basements, but they'll run dry in 48 hours. People are going to wake up tomorrow with no water to drink, no water to bathe their kids. I looked at the tank. It wasn't just vandalism anymore. It was a siege. Frank, I said, we have to tell them. She's already ahead of you, Frank said, pulling out his phone. She's telling everyone you poisoned the water. She's saying you dumped chemicals in the tank, and she had to seal it to save the groundwater. She's painting herself as the hero. My phone started ringing. It was a number I didn't know. I answered. Is this Barnes? A voice shouted. You sick freak. My kids are drinking bottled water because of you. I ought to come over there and... I hung up. It rang again. Another neighbor. Threats. Anger. Fear. I looked at Frank. They think I did this. Fear beats facts when the tap runs dry, Frank said. I sat on my porch steps, head in my hands. I was the villain. I was the guy who poisoned the well. She had won. Wade, Frank said quietly. There's one thing she doesn't know. I looked up. I saw the truck coming this morning, Frank said. I was checking my fence line. I had a bad feeling. So I pulled out my phone. He tapped the screen and held it out to me. It was a video. Grainy, taken from behind a tree line, but the audio was crystal clear. Deborah's voice. Fill it to the rim. I don't care what he says. I have the authority. Worker. Should we check with the owner? Deborah. The owner is uncooperative and negligent. The association is taking control. Just pour it. I want this thing useless by noon. It was a smoking gun. But it was more than that. It proved she ordered the destruction. It proved she impersonated authority. This is good, I said. But it's not enough. She'll spin it. She'll say it was an emergency. We need to get everyone in a room, Frank said. We need them to see this. Before the water runs out. We spent the night planning. We called every neighbor in the valley. We told them there was an emergency town hall meeting at Frank's barn the next night. We promised answers. We promised water. Most of them were hostile. Why should we listen to him? But Frank had lived there for 40 years. His word was gold. They agreed to come. I spent the next day digging. I went through my property records. I found the old easement agreements tucked into a mislabeled folder. I found the canceled checks. And then, I found the bombshell. I found Deborah's planning application for the Millbrook Wellness Center. It was filed with the county 3 years ago. And right there, in the water source section, it listed existing concrete reservoir on Miller parcel. She knew. She knew exactly what that tank was. She had planned to use it for her spa. The meeting was set for 7 p.m. At 6:45, the barn was packed. 11 families. Angry fathers, worried mothers. Deborah wasn't there. We didn't invite her. I stood up on a hay bale. The room went quiet, but it was a hostile silence. I know you think I poisoned the water, I said. I know you think I'm the reason your taps are dry. You are, someone shouted. Deborah told us. Deborah told you a lot of things, I said. But did she tell you this? I nodded to Frank. He projected the video onto a bedsheet we had hung up. The room watched in silence as Deborah ordered the destruction of the tank. They heard her arrogance. They heard her dismiss the property rights. She didn't seal it because it was poisoned, I said when the video ended. She sealed it because she wanted to break me. She cut off your water to steal my land. Then I put up the slide of her wellness center plans. She wanted to buy my farm, I explained. When I bought it, she decided to drive me out. She destroyed the community water supply, your water, just to lower my property value. The mood in the room shifted. It went from anger at me to a cold, hard realization. They had been played. They had been used as pawns in a real estate scam. My kids have no water, a woman named Margaret said, her voice shaking. She did this on purpose? Yes, I said. and she charged me $6,000 for it. The room erupted, but it wasn't chaos. It was focused fury. What do we do? Frank asked. We sue, I said, and we go to the police. But not with a noise complaint. With fraud. The next morning, the counterattack began. Deborah woke up to a convoy of sheriff's deputies. But this time, they weren't there for a civil dispute. I had gone to the county inspector, Sarah Chun, with the fake association documents. Sarah took one look at the forged county seals and called the district attorney. Impersonating a government official. Forgery. Fraud. Property destruction. Endangerment of public welfare. When the deputies knocked on Deborah's door, she tried to pull the same act. She waved her clipboard. She talked about safety protocols. But then the deputies showed her the video. They showed her the affidavits from 11 families testifying that she had cut off their water supply. They arrested her in her driveway. She was screaming about her rights, about how we were all ungrateful, about how she was the only one holding the community together. The fallout was spectacular, because she had documented her own crimes so thoroughly, keeping copies of her fake letters, her invoices, her plans. The DA had a field day. It turned out she had been embezzling money from a previous job, too, which was how she funded her lifestyle. She faced 11 civil lawsuits from the neighbors. She faced criminal charges for the fraud and destruction of property. She pleaded guilty to avoid a 10-year sentence. She got 2 years probation, massive restitution fines, and a court order to leave the state of Nebraska forever. But the best part? The water. The community rallied. We couldn't unfill the tank, but we could build a better one. We formed a real cooperative, the Community Truth and Transparency Water Co-op. We pooled our money, including the damages we won from Deborah, and drilled a new, modern well system with a high-capacity tower. I donated the land for the new tower. My garden. It's thriving. The native wildflowers came in beautifully that spring. 6 months after the incident, I was standing by the new water tower with Frank. His grandson was checking the pressure gauges. You know, Frank said, spitting into the dirt. She did us a favor. How do you figure? I asked. We never talked before, he said, gesturing to the valley. Now, we're a community. A real one. Not because of rules, but because we had to survive her. I guess you're right, I said. Plus, Frank grinned. I hear she moved to Phoenix. Those HOA people down there eat amateurs like her for breakfast. I laughed. I still have the invoice she gave me. I framed it. It hangs in my hallway as a reminder. Never trust a clipboard. Trust your neighbors. And if someone tries to pour concrete on your dreams, make sure you're filming. So, I have to ask you guys, have you ever had a neighbor who tried to play God? What would you have done if someone cut off your water just to make a point? Would you have moved, or would you have fought back like we did? Let me know in the comments. I read every single one. And if you're ever in Millbrook Valley, stop by. The water is cold, clean, and free of tyranny. Thanks for listening. Stay hydrated, folks.